In a previous lesson, we discussed the idea of identity, and we came to understand that identity is basically the key features that an individual uses to describe themselves and to show and manifest their uniqueness. We understood that identity had features, these key features or characteristics, and that some of them were individualistic in nature and some of them were collective or group in nature. Some of the collective or group features we came to understand were, for example, the idea of national identity. So let's consider national identity. And we understand that national identity is a feeling a person shares with a group. It's a sense of belonging a person has to a group or a nation. And let's look at national identity a little more closely to get a better understanding of it. Well, to begin with, national identity, like identity, has some key features to it. So let's consider four of them, and we will in time in our consideration of these various key features that make up national identity, give some specific examples. So we're going to look at some examples of symbols, examples of beliefs and myths, examples of values, and examples of activities, because symbols, beliefs and myths, values and activities are important key features that make up national identity. Now, in order to provide some examples, we need a context. So let's choose an actual cultural group and nation and see if we can find some examples that manifest and illustrate these various key features. And since we need to do that, and since we need to choose an actual culture and nation, we'll use my background, that of the Greek culture, and we'll use Greece and its national identity as an example. So let's start with some examples of symbols. Well, obviously the first example for any national identity, whether it's a country such as Greece or any other, would be a flag. And the Greek flag is unique in that there are actually two of them. Greece uses two flags. They have an official flag or political flag, which they use on a daily basis, and then they have a formal flag, which is somewhat different, which they fly during important national events and holidays. Another important symbol that makes up the national identity of Greece is the Christian cross, and this is important because the Greek people see themselves as a Christian nation. The Acropolis, which is an important architectural and ancient feature of the city of Athens, is quite important as an element of the national identity of Greece because it symbolizes the heritage of the Greek civilization, the ancient Greek civilization, to the Greek people, and it's also important because it's a key tourist attraction which brings in a great deal of revenue to the country of Greece. The owl is another important symbol. The owl symbolizes wisdom, and it's an important symbol of Greece and of the Greek national identity, and it's important in part because, again, it goes back to the heritage of the Greek people, to the ancient Greeks, which did take the owl as an important symbol of their identity, and it continues to be an important symbol of the national identity of Greece today. How about some examples of beliefs and myths? What beliefs and or myths make up important elements, key features of the national identity of the Greek people and of Greece? One would be the fact that modern Greeks see themselves as direct descendants of the ancient Greeks. Now, whether or not this is factually true is actually immaterial because as a belief and as a myth, one that makes up an important element of the national identity of the country, the Greeks see it as being true. They see themselves as direct descendants of ancient Greeks, and they see themselves as a people who have lived in this area for over 3,000 years. Also, an important belief, which is a fact, Greece is the first civilization of the Western world. Now, this is not modern Greece, but ancient Greece. But as a belief or myth, the modern Greeks see themselves as the direct descendants of an ancient civilization, which was the first of the Western world. So this belief makes up an important and forms an important aspect of the national identity of the country. Another important belief is the fact that modern Greeks see themselves as an Hellenic nation. In other words, they're a nation wholly made up of Greek people. They also see themselves as a Christian nation, and the fact that they are Hellenic and Christian, these facts are important to the Greek people and form an important part of their identity. When we consider values and we look for some examples of values from the Greek context, one that is quite important is the value of philotimo. And philotimo has no direct English translation, but the closest meaning would be personal pride, a sense of duty and honor, respect, particularly for elders, and the idea of self-sacrifice. Philotimo is an important part of the Greek national identity, and it's an important value of the people. Hospitality is also quite important to the Greeks. They underscore it and see its importance within their society, and so hospitality forms a very important part of the national identity of Greece. As well, liberty is an important value. The Greeks value and underscore the importance of their liberty, particularly because in most of their modern history, they were conquered by outside foreign forces. And so once they achieve their independence and their liberty, they see that value as being quite important. Family is particularly important to the Greek people, and it's an important value. The idea of having a strong sense of family and serving and respecting family is extremely important to the Greek people, and the idea of family forms an important part of the national identity of the country. How about some examples of activities? What activities do the Greek people partake in which really serve to form their national identity? Well, the first is soccer. Soccer is quite an important sport to the Greek people, and it's the official sport of the country, and it does help serve to form its national identity. Another important activity is the sport of basketball. The Greek people take basketball quite seriously, and it's a very popular sport in Greece. In fact, they take great pride in their national achievements in basketball. The fact that Greece is the only country in Europe to win both the European soccer and basketball titles in the same year, and the fact that Greece is the last national team to defeat the United States in international basketball. This brings great pride to the Greek people, and it's an important part of their national identity. Swimming is quite important. It's a very important leisurely activity of the Greek people, and most Greeks will tend to go swimming in the summertime, go to the beaches and enjoy the summer sun and swim, and so it forms an important part of their national identity. Wrestling is a popular sport in Greece, and it harkens back to their heritage as it was initially a sport of the ancient Greeks at their Olympics, and the modern Greeks see it as an important part of their national identity. Track and field is also something that's quite popular in Greece, and for the same reasons. It's part of the ancient heritage that the Greeks have, as track and field were important events or make up important events of the ancient Olympic Games. Boating is another activity, a leisure activity that's popular in Greece. Greece is a peninsula, so it's surrounded by water on three sides, and boating is an activity because of the proximity of the sea that is quite popular with the Greek people. And of course, fishing for the same reason as boating, the fact that Greece is a peninsula and is surrounded by seas on three sides. Fishing is a popular leisure activity in the country, and like all the other activities, makes up an important element of the national identity of the people. Well, let's look at another country. Why don't we consider Canada for a moment, and let's do the same thing. We'll consider symbols, beliefs and myths, values, and activities, and let's take a moment to see if we can come up with some examples from a Canadian context. Well, obviously the flag is important to Canada, and it's an important symbol of the Canadian national identity, and one of the important symbols on the Canadian flag, and it's an important symbol of its own that represents Canada, is the maple leaf. The maple leaf is a symbol that right away illustrates and manifests the national identity of the country. The beaver is another important symbol of the country, and the beaver is on many of the coins of the Canadian currency. And the beaver is important because beaver pelts were an important commodity that were sought after, and the beaver trapping industry was one of the first industries that helped to develop what would become Canada. How about some examples of beliefs and myths? What beliefs and myths do Canadians hold that really make up their national identity? Well, one, Canadians are seen as a polite people. In fact, many people see this. In the United States, Canadians are seen as being a very polite people, and sometimes Americans will joke on how polite they see Canadians being. Canadians are also seen as a funny people. When we consider all the various comedians and actors who have come from Canada, people such as Mike Myers, we see that whether or not it's actually true, as a belief, Canadians are seen as being quite funny. Another important belief of Canadians, and it's also something that many people around the world see and believe, Canadians are a peaceful people. If we remember that the idea of peacekeeping, something that was begun with the United Nations, was actually begun by a Canadian Prime Minister, Preston Pearson, and it's also important to realize that some of the most important peacekeeping missions have been conducted by Canadian forces. And of course, Canadians are a hockey nation. They see themselves as a hockey nation, and that's an important belief. Canada strives to win at all international competitions and has actually won the last gold medal at the Winter Olympics in ice hockey in both the men's and women's teams. How about some examples of values? What values do Canadians hold as being important and which form important elements of their national identity? Well, tolerance. Canada is seen as a tolerant nation. We accept diversity and we recognize it, and we tolerate differences among people. And as part of the idea of tolerance, another important value that we hold as Canadians is the idea of peaceful coexistence. Despite the fact that we're quite diverse, that we have diverse cultures and religious groups, we tend to coexist peacefully with one another and accept our differences. Generosity is an important value of the Canadian people. Canadians are seen to be quite generous. They give both to charities within the country domestically and internationally, and generosity is seen to be an important value of the Canadian identity. Respectfulness, along with being a polite people, Canadians value the idea of respect and being respectful, and so respectfulness as a value is an important part of the Canadian national identity. And of course, diversity. We're a multicultural nation. We see ourselves as a cultural mosaic, and so we tolerate and enjoy diversity, and diversity, the idea of differences, is an important part of our national identity. How about some examples of activities? What activities do Canadians take part in that really make up a sense of group and a sense of nation? Well, hockey, of course. Canada is a hockey nation, and we pride ourselves on the fact that we invented ice hockey and that we're the most successful country internationally at ice hockey. In fact, we even see commercials in our country that say hockey is our game. Lacrosse is another important and popular activity in Canada. It makes up an important part of our national identity. Lacrosse is actually the official sport of the country, and lacrosse was a sport first invented by First Nations groups in Eastern Canada, and so it really is an important part of our national identity. Skiing, of course, both cross-country and downhill, is very important as an element of Canada's national identity because we're a winter northern country, and so with our long winter, skiing becomes an important and popular activity, and it makes up an important part of our identity. Ice skating. Can't have ice hockey without ice skating, but even ice skating, such things as figure skating, speed skating, whether it's short track or distance, ice skating is an important activity and popular activity that many Canadians take part in, and we see it as part of our national identity. And of course, hiking. Canada is a very large country. We're the second largest country in the world. We have beautiful scenery, great national parks, lots of mountains, lots of coastal areas. So hiking becomes an important and popular activity, and it's an important element of our national identity. Now, we've considered two countries. We looked at Greece and then we looked at Canada, and we saw how national identity has some important key elements to it, and we saw that these key elements, such as symbols, beliefs, values, and activities, make up the important elements of our identity and create that sense of belonging that individuals have and share when they belong and have a sense of belonging to a group.